Welcome to this week's episode of the SJPC Cast. Today you have Skylar. You also have a special guest. With us today is Dr. Flo.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Dr. Flo, what exactly is it that you do?
I am an epidemiologist, and so I study why people get sick and what we can do about it. And I've been pretty active in our community for the 20 years that I've lived here. And so I am excited to be joining you today to talk a little bit about what happened at the county this week.
All right. Yeah. Well, then let's just go ahead and start there. So can you give us just kind of a little preface for why you were at the county, what they were talking about, and then kind of give us a little bit of a rundown on how it went?
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated. So do a little bit of education first, which is that, we have a budget process for our county government. There's about a $9 billion budget or so this year. And so that process usually has two parts. One part happens in June where they approve their preliminary budget. And then because so much of the county's budget is reliant on the state, after the state finalizes its budget, they come back again in September and they make adjustments. And so that happened this year. In June, they finalized the budget. There was a $100 million proposed deficit that they were trying to address. And so they asked departments to make cuts. And all the departments did have to make cuts. But the district attorney and the sheriffs were not happy with the cuts that they were asked to make. And so after the cuts were made, they decided to come back and ask for additional dollars. And so there was a special meeting held in July, not waiting until September, but in July to consider those requests.
Is there like a precedent? Like, is this a thing that happens all the time? Like if you are like the Department of Health and Human Services or like, somebody who like helps the parks, can they vote on the budget and then you can come back and say, actually, no, I would like more money than you just voted for?
No, this is not something that typically happens. And part of the reason that it happened this time is something that's related to sort of the powers of these different departments. So all the other departments in the county are run by department heads that are overseen by the county. In this case, though, the district attorney and the sheriffs are independently elected. And so that means that they have a different level of control over their budgets. That means that once the budget is approved, they can decide entirely how to spend it. And so there isn't really this notion that individual programs can get cut. But in order to try to get more money for themselves, they went to the community and chose the most popular programs that they had, the ones that community members like, the ones that are often effective. And they said, because we have a lower budget, those, programs and those functions are going to be cut. And so rightly, community members showed up and said, what do you mean you're going to cut these programs? But that's not really true. They could preserve those programs and cut vacancies. They could cut less effective programs. In the case of the district attorney, they could have just decided to do away with death penalty because those are so much more expensive than just pursuing life in prison. There's so many different ways that they could have handled their budget, but they didn't want to be cut at all. So this was their way of trying to push back on those cuts.
Okay, so I mean, it's understandable that they want to keep all their stuff, even though everybody's cinching their belts. They don't want to cinch their belts, but they do have to go back and ask the County Board of Supervisors to approve these not cuts. So I'm assuming that because there were all these obvious things that they could have cut, they could have taken money from internally from their departments, that all 5 county supervisors came together and said, no, we don't think so. We're gonna stand on our original vote and pass the budget as planned.
Yeah, I wish that was the case, but unfortunately, that's not what happened.
I'm shocked.
Well, 2 votes took place. So the first vote was to decide what the scope of this of the vote for the day was going to be, because initially Supervisor Pat Hume, who represents Elk Grove and sort of most of the southern district, cuts it a little bit into Rancho Cordova. He proposed that we come back, that the county comes back and makes some decisions about the sheriff's department budget, in particular because they wanted to address like the fireworks enforcement, the POP team and the HOT team. Those are the teams that are working in problem-oriented policing and the homeless outreach team. And again, really popular programs. People like them. They're responsive in the community. So, he proposed those. And then Supervisor Rodriguez wanted to also consider the district attorney and kind of expand the scope. And so there was a little bit of a conversation at first, and they decided to vote 4-1 not to consider the district attorney and only to focus on the sheriff's request, because that was Pat Hume's initial ask. ask. And then, unfortunately, in a 3-2 vote, two of the supervisors did agree and said there's no reason we should be opening this up this early. We don't know what the final state budget's going to be, and this is just 6 weeks away. There's not an emergency right now. Literally, none of the hot teams or the pop teams have actually had their services cut already, so there's been no impact to these cuts. So why do we have to do this right now? But unfortunately, 3 of the supervisors said, yeah, we think we should give these dollars. And the overall impact of that is that we're supposed to have about $16 million in what's known as contingency funds. Those are the dollars we have in case something comes up that we really need to address. And in a county with 1.6 million people, that can happen a lot. We not only spent down the $9 million we had left over from last year, but we only had 6 of the $16 million set aside in the original budget. And they just spent 3 more of them. So now we're down to only $3 million in contingency when we need 16. And so that's the other impact of making this decision so prematurely.
Okay. Well, where do we go from here? I mean, is it pretty much a done deal for this cycle, or do you think that there's going to be kind of future opportunity for the community to kind of get involved and see if we can get in front of this?
The community should be ready to go come September, because that's when the budget is actually finalized. Even when they pass the budget in June, it's preliminary, but September is when the budget is finalized. And so we need to put pressure and be able to say, you know, the priority here is making sure people have the food assistance from CalFresh, that people have, you know, their Medi-Cal benefits. There's so many things that Trump's big bill from 2025 are really going to cost the county and are going to cut into the revenues. And so we need to prioritize making sure that the things that keep people healthy and well and fed and with medical care are our top priorities for the county. And so there's another opportunity in just 6 weeks to make your voices heard.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on to what is happening this week, tomorrow. So the county is apparently still tuckered out from their big action from last week. So they're going to be taking this week off, but the city is back. There is a law and legislation meeting, a 2 p.m. Council meeting, and a 5 p.m. council meeting. The law and legislation is pretty by the numbers, so there's nothing really too controversial to mention there. The 5 p.m. meeting is back to that, you know, as we've mentioned before, they're basically gonna put it on the ballot to call their old retirement system obsolete and completely dismantle it, which as far as I can tell is like fairly uncontroversial, because it sounds like nobody's really involved with that. So we're not really gonna get into that. But at the 2 p.m. meeting, there is an item that we did flag. It is item number 11. It was continued from before they went on break. So you might remember a couple of weeks ago, there was an item that was basically, it's like a pass-through funding thing. So the way that it breaks down is that City Council took this Urban Area Security Initiative grant from the California Office of Emergency Services. It's a component of the Federal Homeland Security Grant Program. As a condition of the grant award, 30% of the funding received must be allocated to support law enforcement and terrorism prevention-oriented activities. To meet this requirement, the Sacramento Police Department seeks City Council authorization to pass through federal grant funds to the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office for staffing of the Central California Intelligence Center, the Regional Threat Assessment Center, to carry out the provision of law enforcement services. So if you recall, from the last time they discussed this, a few of the council members, namely Vang, Katie Maple, and Eric Guerra, voiced some concerns about basically the Sacramento's relationship to these federal offices that, as we've pointed out on the show several times before, the county sheriff has been like really aggressively kind of like weaving in the sheriff's department to a lot of these Homeland Security, FBI, and most kind of problematically ICE. So there's like a lot of collaboration there, and now it seems like the city is kind of getting webbed into a lot of this, and it's not clear to anyone, including our elected leadership, what the communication looks like what they're on the hook for, what they have to tell the feds, how they have to cooperate. Nobody really knows, including, if you go by the presentation from a couple of weeks ago, the Sacramento Police Department. So basically, given that, they were told last time, you got to come back with like a little more info so that we have a clearer directive on like exactly how information is being shared and how we're involved. And so tomorrow at the 2 p.m. meeting, this is item 11. It's on consent again for some reason. I mean, you have to imagine they know it's going to get pulled, but it will be coming back around. So that is kind of going to be the one. It's very, I don't know. This feels very strange because it also kind of boils down to SAC. I mean, at least given the last meeting, it boils down to SAC PD being like, well, we can just trust the feds. And people being like, well, you know, based on everything we've been seeing on social media, it seems like we actually really cannot trust the feds. So there's kind of an immediate disagreement there. But also, like, it doesn't say we have to give 30% of the funding received to the county sheriff. It just says that we have to use it to support law enforcement, terrorism prevention-oriented activities. I don't know like exactly what the threshold for that is, but like for a department that constantly talks about how it is super underfunded and it needs to get even more than the lion's share it already gets out of the city budget, why do they have to give that? I don't understand, I guess, why you would have to like give that money out to the county if you can handle terrorism prevention in-house, which I imagine you can, because terrorism prevention is not a real thing in the city of Sacramento or the county of Sacramento, unless you count the people who are outside the John Moss building, which I personally do not.
Yeah, this continues a pretty, long-standing challenge that we've been having in, I think, the country, and sort of what Sacramento's role in it is, which is this, sort of militarization of our police departments, and this increasing collaboration with our federal departments. Now, in general, collaboration should be a good thing, right? It means that we are using our resources more wisely and more effectively. But we have seen, recently these collaboration agreements with the federal government, which have some pretty scary language in them when they are well defined, or are really broadly defined, like terrorism. And it's like, well, what exactly constitutes prevention of terrorism? Is that everything from, preventing the radicalization of people because we give them jobs and healthcare and food? Or is that, a very specific thing where we're looking at, counterterrorism activities that are international in scope? So all of this raises a lot of definitions questions of like, what are we trying to do and why, and who's the appropriate body to be able to control that? It's also really interesting that these funds to do one thing are tied with having to do something completely unrelated to that. And that's something that we should be skeptical of, because if we're trying to make changes in one area, it would make sense to do complementary things, but why are we being asked to do something different? That feels a little bit like a pass-through, like we're trying to divert away. The real purpose of these dollars is to give more money to whatever these terrorism efforts are, and not really the main thing that we're supposed to see as the incentive. So that's my concern. The other part is, of course, if we don't have definitions clearly, outlined, what exactly could anything be counterterrorism? Because I would argue, let's, fund summer programs for kids, because that would certainly help us to, reduce violence, and violence terrorizes our communities. Boom, there we go. So like, we can be creative about what it means. And I don't think we should just go with the sort of traditional definition of what terrorism is, especially if they haven't given us any.
Well, right. Especially because as like I said, given if we're just going to go by the traditional definition of terrorism, that's not a thing that we have around here, like in a local way, unless you narrow it down to like the Trump, anti-ICE protesters are terrorism definition, which is certainly where the feds are at, seems to be where the county is at. Hopefully that's not where the city gets to with it, So we'll see how that goes. I plan to be there tomorrow at 2. So yeah, I will be there. If you want to come out, you would be more than welcome to come out and let them know what you think. To that end, coming back from the break, there is a new thing. So the city launched this new public meeting portal. So now, or a public participation hub, excuse me. So now, rather than going out, if you come in person, and rather than filling out a paper slip, you go on your phone and you can like register and let them know who you are, what comment or what item you're trying to comment on, and go through that way. what are your thoughts on this? Like for me, I think this is like mostly just kind of a lateral move, especially because I think, you know, what the thing that is kind of weird is that they want your first and last name in your email. But technically, they wanted that on the paper one too, and I don't think there's anything from stopping yourself from just using a burner like, you know, cakesjuicy420@gmail.com and submitting under cakes, right? Much like it was with the written one. So I don't, I feel like there probably are some like alarm bells that should be ringing when anything like this changes. But for me, going over it initially, it seems like it seems pretty lateral to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd have to go and look to see what the exact like requirements are in terms of public comment, but I don't believe that you are compelled to provide any particular information about yourself. So if that's required to be able to use the portal, it would raise the question of, do I still have the option of submitting the paper slip where I don't have to, right? Am I giving that to you for the convenience of being able to sign up online, which gets into a weird like, is it convenience or not? The thing I am excited about with this participation portal is that it does allow for some of the recaps of the meeting to be available in more languages than just English and Spanish. There also will be simulcast. You'll be able to see the captions in English and Spanish. And so I know that's obviously a disability access thing for people who, you know, maybe hearing impaired, but also for people who, you know, don't speak English as their first language. So that part to me was exciting to see, especially because we know that language access is something that needs to be a priority given how diverse Sacramento is and how many people don't speak English as their first language. And then there's a challenge though that's happening with the portal that I saw a few people talking about online, including Councilmember Katie Maple, which is that it's not incredibly intuitive to be able to find the agenda on there. I think you have to turn your phone into landscape mode, and then maybe you can go under files to find the agenda. So there are a few things that, you know, working out the glitches of just like how the interface is laid out that hopefully will be done pretty quickly and are not, you know, big heavy lifts. But yeah, I'm inclined to say it's lateral-ish, you know, it's like a little bit better, you know, maybe being able to go in and request your ability to be able to speak allows more people to be able to participate. But I do just want to make sure that we're not sort of requiring people to share information that they wouldn't be required to share otherwise.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we're going to see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is pretty much it for this week. I mean, more, you know, there's always terrifying stuff happening around here, but for now, it seems like a fairly light week. So if you're going to be there tomorrow, great. You can also use the Public Participation Hub to submit written comment if you can't be there. Anyway, that's it for us. Dr. Flo, thank you so much for giving us this time out of, well, you haven't had a job for years, so, but you're busy. Listen, leisure is important. Everybody agrees that leisure is important. So thanks for putting pants on and getting off the couch. And yeah, we will talk to you soon.